However, we also have a place in the UK. We've been founded 4 years ago and we are privately held. Looking at our technologies, we actually have two. One is the MQTT broker Mosquito. It's actually the #1 downloaded MQTT broker out there. It's a message broker supporting the messaging protocol MQTT, but it's not going to be the focus of our talk today. But we're gonna focus on Streamsheets. And Streamsheets actually let you help build applications without having to code a single line of code, but by leveraging your spreadsheet skills, so something that you might have from Excel or Google Sheets already. Both technologies have an open source core, and that open source core is hosted as in their respective projects at the Eclipse Foundation, and we complement them with further premium functionality to give you even more. Really quickly on Streamsheets, I mentioned it now already a couple of times. The core idea is to build applications without having to program at all and give you full flexibility of what you want to do or what you want to do. And if you think about what are the basic concepts or the bullet points to remember there, one is that you can connect to essentially everything. You can create your own logic so that the application does exactly what you want to do. You can visualize data. You can visualize in charts and graphs and have full flexibility over that. And you can also send out data again, and therefore essentially controlling whatever can receive data. With that, we're typically working in this real-time environment, so everything that you want to do or that your application is supposed to do, it does immediately. However, you can also build applications that deal, for example, with data that's been around quite a long time already. So they're talking to you, for example, about databases and give you actually control over what you want to do with that data, when and how. Really quickly, a small video, it just takes 20 seconds here to show what that data in motion actually is. So assume we have a data stream that can come from anything. Let's assume in this case it's sensor data that's coming in. We subscribe to that data, meaning we get this in. That's what's happening on the left-hand side arrow there. We get the data in, we build our logic, and then we can also send it out on the other side. Core idea here is that you get full transparency over how the data stream that you plugged into your stream sheet is structured. You then work with drag and drop to make a direct connection between the data stream and your cells or your sheet. And in your sheet, you're working actually with what you know already from Google Sheets and others. You work with cell references and formulas to build a logic. In this case, it's going to be a small history and then also a visualization of that. And everything is automatically dynamic, meaning in the moment that something's happening, your application knows it and does that. One further addition maybe here that's also quite important is this runs the whole time, meaning it's server-based. It runs on your server, and unless you shut down that server, it runs 24/7. And that's quite interesting because you must remember here that you can actually compare it to coding in such a sense that you're building an application by filling cells with formulas instead of writing lines of code. But in the end, the same thing happens. And what's going to happen in our case is that we're going to fetch weather data from third-party provider. We're going to take this data, modify it a little bit, just slightly, and then send text messages, in this case, actually, to my smartphone. And the whole thing to remember here is these are integrations. In this case, we're going to show two. You can already connect to any REST API through the HTTP functions that we have. But in this case, and you're going to see that in a second, we make it even simpler with dedicated functions for that. What we're going to build, if I'm fast enough, it's going to look in the end like this, meaning we are connecting to OpenWeather and to SMS77. And it's going to be like this, that we have a function that's called OpenWeather current that's going to send the location, in this case Moscow, to OpenWeather. OpenWeather is going to return the current weather of Moscow in this case, and later on other places as well. We're going to bring it in a structure how we want to see or look at that. And then we have another function actually that's going to trigger SMS77 with a text, and that text then in the end is going to come up and appear on my smartphone. And that's exactly what we're going to build now. We have a couple of polls so throughout the webinar, and it would be really nice if you could answer them, and it gives us a little bit of background feedback and also paves the path, so to say, what we want to do next. And it would be great, January, if you could pull up the first one. So just going to give you a second to answer there. I'm going to go here in position. What we see here is our dashboard where we have our different applications that we might have built already. We're going to build one completely from scratch, and that's exactly what I want to do now as well. I'm going to click here on plus. First, I have to give it a name, so that's going to be weather to SMS in this case. And we can select a couple of consumers if we have any already. These are for connecting to existing data streams. That's something that we don't need right now, because we actually gonna trigger everything from within the sheet. Long story short, we use no consumer, hit add. Now the application is actually being generated in the background. You see the app is loading. That takes a second, and here we are. It's basically our plain sheet in the beginning, and that's where we're going to create our logic right now. A couple of things to mention here that are quite interesting, or that we're going to use throughout, well, every time we build an application. That's, for example, our control panel up here, where we can start and stop an application, and in this case, then also tell it, for example, how quickly it runs. So we have a blank sheet here in the beginning, and the first thing is actually, okay, we know we want to somehow connect to OpenWeather. Instead of using, for example, an HTTP function, we have a new one. We've been talking about it quite a lot already, and in this case, we're just going to look at what that function is actually called. And we see that OpenWeather provides the application, the API itself provides a couple of information here. So we can check out, for example, what the air pollution is right now, what the forecast is, what historical values, where the same thing actually goes for the weather itself. And in addition to that, we can also find the coordinates, longitude and latitude to places. Or if we have these coordinates, we can also find out which place that actually is. Long story short, in our case, we're going to need an OpenWeather current that gives us the current weather. And if we use this function, we see, okay, it tells us that, well, there's an argument error. So obviously, we haven't put in any arguments. And if we look a little bit more closely into what that function actually needs, it needs 3 parameters. One is an API key, the other is the location itself, and then where we want to have this information after we've asked the service. So in this case, I'm just gonna have to find my API key first. That's something we're gonna put in, for example, here on the right-hand side. Then the next thing is going to be the location. That's something that we're going to need as well. I've prepared that to find these API keys once you have an account in OpenWeather as well as in SMS 77. Makes it really, really easy to retrieve them. In this case, my OpenWeather API key is this one. Just going to jump back in here, paste it in here. The location is one, well, that's easily set. In our case, let's start, for example, with Berlin. That's something I'm just going to type in. And now I'm going to select exactly these arguments as parameters, or these cells as parameters in my function. In this case, the first one is actually F8. If I see it correctly, the next one should be then the F9. And then the target, so where I want to have the response, is on the left-hand side in my inbox. Clicking OK here, and now we're just gonna let our application run. I just checked here how quickly it's going to run, so how quickly it's going to recalculate. Just that we are not listening to any data streams, but we are actually triggering everything from within the sheet, so it runs automatically, cyclically. And here's a cycle per default. It's every 100 milliseconds. That's a little bit quick. We don't need that far, so I'm just going to go down to once every second. That's quick enough. And then I'm going to start our application. And we see we get the first information in here actually from exactly our call here in F11. So that's our, let's call it service call. That's actually calling the API. And now on the left-hand side, we actually see what we get back as a result, as information. So unsurprisingly, it's information on the weather. There comes quite a lot of that. The main ones I'm interested in right now is actually, for example, the temperature, then also quite interesting, maybe what it feels like. Always good to know is the humidity. And then it's also quite nice to know actually what the description is. So what the sky looks like in this case. In Berlin, they're lucky, they have a clear sky there. And now I just want to prepare that data a little bit, or the application, that it looks a little bit more nicely and put everything together. Meaning I'm gonna make this part right here bold. And now gonna basically structure that a little bit. Meaning we have the temperature here, then also what it feels like. It's essentially the information we have on the right-hand side, just a little bit differently written. This one right here is the description. And what we're going to do with that now is we see we have to make slightly just minor transformations. One, for example, is that we get the temperature here in that we clicked, dragged and dropped in, and that we have here in M&N in row 8, actually in Kelvin. And I'd like to have that in Celsius. That's what I'm used to. So for that reason, I actually going to reference exactly this cell up here and then subtract. And then do the conversion. If I'm not mistaken, that should be 273 here to make the difference, so to say. And now we see that the temperature in Berlin seems to be 11 degrees. And now thinking about that, I'd like to actually extend that a little bit further. So also say, right now we saw it was Kelvin, now it's Celsius. And to actually also tell that in our application or put that down, I'm just going to concatenate that a little bit, meaning I'm gonna write down also that it is Celsius. Okay, looking good. We see it and it's very specific. I don't need such a long number. I actually gonna just for that reason round it. So that's another function that I'm using here. It's called round. It lets you round values to, in this case, 1 decimal, but can also be longer, of course. Clicking here, OK, and there we go. That looks good. That's exactly the way I want to have it. That's also how I want to have it for the feels-like temperature, so to say. For the reason, I'm just going to copy that down, and there it works. OK, so it's at 11 degrees, but it feels like 9. So maybe it's not that nice after all. What we're going to do here with the humidity is also going to take the humidity from here, and then basically, as that is always measured in percent, I'm gonna add the percentage sign here and then description. I think that is fine. That one I just gonna take from here on the right-hand side. Want to right align that, maybe once here, I'm gonna make bold as well. And there we are already. So what's happening right now, right here, is that we're already calling another service that is now automatically every second checking actually what the location is that we have in here and then retrieves the data. So we can actually now play around with that. Let's check out what the weather is in London. So it's a little bit warmer, 13 degrees. If we can also check out the next place like Buenos Aires, they probably, heavy rain, intensity rain. However, it's warmer, humidity obviously is quite high, and seems to be jumping there a little bit at the weather station. And this way we can actually play around and look at different places and get the weather from these different places. And you see it's very flexible and does all of that automatically. However, what is now actually the next step? Well, we said that we also wanted to connect that to or to send SMS, and that's exactly the next step that we're going to take right here. And just in the same way as we dealt with OpenWeather, we're just going to first look at actually what do we going to need. In this case, SMS77 is another function, SMS77.SMS_send. So you already see which web service we are using there actually. This one's also going to need an API key. It needs a text. It needs a number actually. And for as it doesn't have all of these, also here again, the argument shows or is red at first, but let's just add these arguments. So in this case, this is also going to be the API key. Then it said we need a text, and it also said that we need a number. In itself, the whole thing is a service call, and I already prepared that in the sense of that I looked up my API key here, and that's exactly the one that we're going to use here. The text, that's something that we can put together in the same fashion as we just did before. So what I want to do here is actually, I'm going to say it is, and then concatenate all of that information. This temperature in where actually, well, in this case, it's Sydney. And now let's also add, and the description is, and the description is then just going to be the last part that we're going to add here to make it not too long. And now we see actually that the text also automatically puts itself together. So if we type in something else here, let's go for Madrid, for example, we're going to see that also this information actually changes in the text. So we have that now also flexible. And the last part here is actually going to be to send this information to a number. Not to overwhelm my phone in a second, I'm just going to pause the application a second. We can still build the logic in here. It's just not sending anything out or recalculating in that fashion. Just gonna take here first my number, that is this one, and then we're gonna go here and paste it in. I just see right now, okay, it's not formatted as I want to, no problem there. It doesn't look like a telephone number. It's actually formatting that, but here we go. We have it again. Seems to work nicely. And now we're just going to add exactly these parameters to our function, and hopefully it is going to be satisfied with this information. So the next one here actually is the text, API key text, and last but not least, my number. And we see, okay, it works. Everything seems to be in order here. I'm just gonna try and go here through simple, small steps to see whether it actually works. So that might now take a second, but no, it went quite quickly. So what I right now just did, I'm not sure whether it can be read perfectly or well, but the last message actually is exactly the one we have in here. So the nice thing about it, it obviously worked. And now I actually want to control that a little bit, because if we're going to click now on play, we're going to send an SMS every second. And that's something that I don't want to do. And we're going to control this in this case through a button. That's what I want to do. So what I'm first going to say is false here. I'll explain in a second what that actually does. And I will add a button. So what is now my objective? My objective is now that every time I click on the button, an SMS is sent. So every time this OpenWeather is actually asked and queried and interacted with every second. However, to SMS 77, we're just going to send something if the button's been clicked, and if it's been clicked once, it's also just been sent once. And how can we actually control that? I already typed in row 27 a false in the if column. That means that right now, actually, this line is never calculated. So if I click now also in play, we're going to calculate once every second. However, this line is never executed because I falsed it. And now the idea is to use the button to actually calculate this row at least once. And this can be done through a function which is called setValue. We're going to use the same function again to also turn this row again off. Just going to write it first here actually within the sheet. So what this function looks like, it looks like this. It's called setValue. value, not a spreadsheet function. It has a condition. In our case, it's always supposed to be true. What does it do? It takes a value. In this case, this value is called false, and put it in a target cell. In this case, the target cell is if 27, without caps lock here, if 27 over there. Now just gonna execute this here, and what we're doing here is setting row 27 to false. That's what's happening right down there. And now I can go there with the button actually, and then do the reverse. Meaning in our case, what we're going to do is I'm going to use this button, go into its properties. So I right-clicked it, and have its properties right here on the right-hand side. Go to events, and then I see I can do something on click, on double click, on mouse down, mouse up. So there are a couple of possibilities here. In my case, it's just going to be on click. What do I want to do? I'm going to use the same function. So it's set value. Its condition is always true. In this case, it is setting the value true. And where does it do that? Well, in the same cell that I'm just going to show it in a second, or for 1 second, with another place here. It's if 30, that it actually does work. And how it works. So right now the application is running. We have in if 30, we don't have anything. I click the button, and in if 30, we see that the value true has been placed up here. It's also turned green, so it does, that actually does work. However, what we actually wanted to do was to set another place, another cell to, give me a second here. I'm going to pause that a second here and go to the properties again. Not if 30, but if 27. That's the one to go. And what does this now do? Our whole logic is actually complete. It doesn't look like we want it to look already. We're going to do that in a second quickly. However, the whole functionality is there already, meaning we now have a button that when I click that, and show that we're also going to use another location. So let's take, for example, Washington. So the information is actually going to change. And what's now going to happen is that if I click on the button, the application runs, then we should also get an SMS. Just click that, and there we also got the SMS in. Got the SMS in. What does it read? It tells us exactly what I see here. It is 9.8 degrees Celsius in Washington, and the description is clear sky. And the nice thing about that is now that we triggered it through the button here on the right-hand corner, basically. The next step now would be, and I don't want to go too much into depth into that because otherwise we're running a little bit long, is we're going to go ahead and then actually visualize that a little bit nicer. So add here, for example, some grayscaling, a gray background. Don't need that on this one here. So we still want to see that it's a service call. For example, in this case, what I wanted to use or do is actually add the logos of the two services that we use here on the right-hand side that we use or integrate with. First, just going to take the colors which I thought looked quite cool, the hex code, and that can work. So in this case, going to take a very, very dark blue. And then the next step is actually to go ahead and take the logos from the two companies. And one would be, in this case, here we have OpenWeather. Just gonna resize that a little bit, place it in there. Won't be a masterwork, but just quickly to give you the rough idea of how that works. We're gonna do pretty much the same thing quickly down here. So we put that into gray. I found a different blue coloring, which I thought worked well. So if you have any information, any input on that, I'm open to that as well. Just leave us a comment, text us. And this is now the other blue. Just going to add also, last but not least, the logo of SMS77. Place that maybe here. I see also that we have here this transparent graying of the row 27, which I actually don't want to have. So that's a sheet property. Can really quickly also take that away. There we are. This down here is also a service call. So doing the same thing as above. And now we are already step by step getting there, I'd say. Meaning I already have it where I wanted to have. Maybe make the button a little bit smaller, place it within here. And now then actually a little trick, I'm going to tell you in a second what that's going to be or why I do that, is I'm going to take here actually just a rectangle, say its line color is white, copy that, place it over this. And now we can actually go into the view mode, just one click up there. And there we are. That's our application. Looks pretty much like I promised in the presentation before. Obviously, we can spend a little bit more time on that, and then it looks even nicer. But that's the way how you integrate with other services through integrations with Streamsheets, in this case, shown on the examples of OpenWeather and SMS77. And ran a little bit longer, but I hope you have questions open for that. And generally, we can also bring up the next poll. Apart from that, what we can also do just to maybe complete it, then it indeed does look like in the presentation, is what I want to do is we see here on that if is actually the if column is shown also in the preview mode. That's maybe something that we don't want to do. For that reason, there's also a really simple trick about that, and that is really that we just gonna hide it. Now it's gone. It's also gone from our application. The last thing that actually is missing is maybe to give it a title. In this case, that's going to be weather. Let's call it weather to SMS. And then, like I know it from other spreadsheets as well, same thing here, just a little bit of alignment, maybe making it bold, changing a couple of things here, and going to place that again in the center. Going to do the same thing with the button. I can move that over here. All right, good. I think we have one last poll. If there aren't any questions, please answer that. Give me a second to complete that part here, and then we're actually through. So this one here would also become a little bit bigger like this, I guess. Just can resize again. Gonna make that again as well in the same gray. There we are. Have to recenter here the logos again in the appropriate place. Make that a little bit further down. Same thing goes for the button. And there we are, I'd say. Hope you had fun, learned something. Please share your comments with us and show us in the forum, for example, what you're building, what you want to build, what's missing, and yeah, what you're integrating with. Thanks for being with us. And we're going to see us in the next webinar. Cheers.